Hello, hello, hello there, Harp family, and welcome back to another Let's Harp About It. How are you doing today? Because if you caught it, if you have been catching the promos, you know what topic we are going to be talking about today. And before we get into it, take a quick second or two or three, like, share, just subscribe, follow, and take a moment to share, let other people know that we are live, we are on today, okay? Let's get into it. It's going to be a hot topic. It's going to be a hot discussion. I got an amazing guest with me today, fam. It's gonna be lit. It's gonna be lit. So take a couple of seconds, share, because you definitely gonna want to do that. Okay? Yeah, I advise you to do that. But as you know, here at Harp on our Let's Harp About It live stream sessions, we discuss all things, all topics, harassment and assault, and the various ways abuse can be perpetuated in society. And this week's topic in particular addresses what? Hostile and toxic work environments, and how we can foster more inclusive workplaces. Because that's important. It's not just about addressing what the problem is, but also understanding that how do we create, avenues for solutions, right? Because that's what we want. But we still can address, the elephant in the room. So yeah, get comfortable. And so, also a quick PSA for those of you if you missed it. We recently celebrated the Women's Equality Day on August 26th. That was, I believe, on Thursday. Yeah. And I mean, for what it's worth, okay, there's so many layers to that, but I'll address that on a separate one. But again, as and as a woman, as an African American woman, as an African woman in America, as a Black woman, all around, and a person of complex intersectionality, I'm typically like, I'm less concerned about equality because, again, to me at this point it's almost like lost its flavor. But I'm glad we're finally moving into spaces where we're talking about equity, right, and equitable involvement, equitable representation. And it is important that we hail equity just as much as we ask for equality, right? Because we know really, like, there's problems also with that whole idea of equality. Yeah. And so again, here we're all about, equitable treatment and equitable representation. That's what we want. And because oftentimes when I hear about this term equality, it's often used to erase people's intersectional lived experiences. And the reality is, for those of us with those complex intersectionalities, we don't get to pick and choose which days, we get to live out specific aspects of our identity. And so, yeah, it doesn't work like that. And in honor of that, I'd like to just, drop us a quick quote by the late great Sister Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, who spoke at the 11th National Women's Rights Convention in 1866. And she said, "You white women speak here of rights. I speak of wrongs. I, as a colored woman, let me take my seat in one of your streetcars, and the conductor will put his hand up and stop the car rather than let me ride." Okay, that's a little Arrested Mobility throwback moment for y'all out there. Shout out to Charles Brown, pioneer of this very timely discussion. Arrested Mobility. If you're not familiar with that, check that out. Please do, because yeah, it's important. And even as we talk about creating inclusive spaces, especially in professional settings, when we talk about hostile or toxic work environments, we got to ask ourselves, like, well, what is that, right? Because people oftentimes just go straight to, well, is it legal? Is it illegal? And like, if it's not illegal, then it's obviously it's fine. But it's not necessarily that, right? A hostile work environment is any workplace that creates a space that is intimidating to employees and makes them feel uncomfortable and or scared due to unwelcomed conduct, especially if that conduct is continuous or perpetual, and is perpetuated, especially when it's perpetuated by, let's say, people in positions of power, whether that's your supervisor or people in upper management, or your fellow employees as well, who happen to have those contextual privileges. And so, in as much as sometimes it's not necessarily illegal, it doesn't, get into the definitions of something that's illegal or in a protected class. This is still the very subtle yet just as potentially deadly cousin to outright harassment and assault. That are covered under the legality spectrums. And so, harassment. Um, on the flip side, when we're talking about like those behaviors that are covered in in the legal system, you know, those are clearly defined in what's, you know, covered in the harassment and anti-discrimination laws that are covered in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And so, you know, harassment is typically any unwelcome conduct that is based on any protected class status. So whether it's race, gender, color, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, or pregnancy, and so on, national origin, age, all that stuff. And so, you know, even though sometimes people may call it like a slight annoyance or discomfort, and people also like to assume that it's isolated incidents. It's not just about having it being an isolated incident, because when isolated incidents happen over a period of time, that's called a pattern. That's called a characteristic behavior. And even though people like to brush those off, those moments of discomfort and toxicity, those can be immensely damaging to not only employee morale, but mental health and wellness. And we have to talk about that. People want to slap on this whole, oh, we care about your mental health. We have mental health assistance programs and all this stuff. And oftentimes it's very performative. Let's just call it what it is. And so we want to make sure that like what the discussion today helps us move forward that needle of really changing the cultural dynamics in these spaces that we happen to find ourselves as professionals in whatever professional setting you happen to find yourself in. So whether that is consistent aggressiveness or ridiculing or victimization, gaslighting, okay, lots of unnecessary complaints or punishments or threats. And really, at the end of the day, we know when we get that vibe. The vibes never lie, because your gut is forever, you know, it will tell you. It'll tell you what it is. And, you know, I mean, I want to take a moment here to pause and, you know, just appreciate my guests, my upcoming guests. We've been having these conversations for quite a period of time now. And I'm excited. I'm excited to have her here today with me as we unpack this topic of hostile and toxic work environments, because it's important and it's real out here. It's real, okay? So my guest today, I have Audra Bandy. She is a fellow engineer and engineers in the house today. Out here in the hashtag women in STEM, hashtag sisters in STEM, you know, hashtag Jedi, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, hashtag DEI, hashtag moving beyond performative diversity. Okay. All right. So let's get into it. I'm going to welcome my sister girl, Audra. Come on through.
Hello, internets. Hello, Winnie.
We out here on Beyond the Internet. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I am wonderful. Like, honestly, conversations with you, like they inspire me to like, okay, I can do this. I like one more day, girl. You know, like, and that is so needed, especially as professionals of us of certain intersectionality, and just people of like diverse lived and unique lived experiences. I think, you know, that is it. Yeah, because like today I woke up and I was just like, I was tired, I've been busy, you know, work, and I was like, do I even really want to address this topic too?
I feel you. I understand that. Yeah. Just
You know,
one
and then
foot in front of the other.
you know, and just the fact that like when I wrote it, I was like, oh no, it's with you. I was like, yes, oh yeah, we gotta do this. I'm excited. Like it's almost like my mini therapy outside of my actual therapies. And so yeah, before we jump literally straight into it, if you can take a quick second, introduce yourself to the people, let them know who you are, what you do, all the good stuff, and yeah, we'll get into it.
Absolutely. Love to. Hello, everyone. My name is Audra. And again, engineers in the house today. So whether you're doing engineering or just an engineer by education, that's what we got going on. So my education background is in engineering, and as a professional, I've been doing engineering and actually planning in the transportation industry for about 16 years now. So a lot of what I do now is translating. So I like to explain it as an engineering translator. So I work with engineers and planners, and I do a lot of management and project management. And I translate to the engineers what planning speak is, and I translate to the planners when we're talking with engineers and what engineer language is about and their concerns and the ideas that they're trying to convey. And that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. Otherwise, involved with professional organizations. So we've got WTS, TRB, some really great ones, and really passionate about women in STEM, and with a particular focus on not just bringing young girls and adult young women into the organization. That's really important. I'm glad there's lots of people focus on that. My focus is what happens once they're already in the industry. So what happens at that 5-year mark when there's so many women that leave the industry? Because if we keep bringing them, that's great. But if they keep leaving, that's not helping us reach our goals. So that's what I'm passionate about.
Come on, third family. I mean, like, yes. Oh, you see, I'm telling you, we out here. And kudos and shout outs to all those organizations that we happen to find ourselves in, because actually that's how we met. I think we met through one of like the TRB events and stuff like that. Shout outs to TRB and all the work that we were doing in there. More stuff to come out of that, FYI, because it's gonna be popping. And yeah, so you really brought up a great point, right? Where we even like, whether it's in academia, whether it's in professional spaces, they're like, oh, we want more women, we want to have more representation, and like the focus is so heavy on like recruiting and like creating the pipeline. But I keep having to remind folks, like, it's one thing to say you want us in the room. It's a different thing when you literally haven't addressed what is the temperature in the room. Step one. Because I was literally just thinking about this week at work. I was like, because I'm forever freezing in my office, forever freezing, and it constantly reminds me of like, oh yeah, these temperatures were set based on studies on what the average white male. So the office is made comfortable for them, hasn't been changed since, right? And it's like you welcomed all these other people into these spaces, but you never change the temperature, and you never change the vibes in those spaces. And then you expect people to just come in and just get comfortable, do what you need to do to accommodate the current cultural norms, right? And
you need to start wearing some more layers of clothing. That's the first thing. So I find this fascinating because I have a side interest in fashion even when I was in university. So aside. So when I was going to college, we had engineering electives that we had to take, and then we had other just general core electives that we were able to take. As much as I love engineering, I was in my 4th year and I was like, that's enough. What's going on at the art school? And so I took fashion design classes. So I was the 4th/5th year engineer with the sophomores and juniors in fashion design classes. So hilarious. So it's a little aside about me. But typically when you also have, in general, males in your office typically are wearing 1 to 2 more layers than you are. So there's an undershirt, there's a shirt. If you're wearing a jacket, there's a jacket. And women typically don't wear as many layers. So just on a practical, pure, just how many articles of clothing are you wearing? You better bring a jacket because it's going to be cold.
Facts, right? I literally always have at least 2 blankets. I have extra tights. I have extra shirts. No, like I'm like, this is like facts, right? And then in the summer, right, when it's blazing hot outside, right, I wear my sundress, but like I always have tights to go underneath. constantly. So I'm like, I have an outside outfit, and then when I get in the office, I have the inside office outfit, right? And as much as it seems like we're you may think we're off topic, but we're very much on topic here, right?
We've strayed.
It really goes back to making the technical practical and understanding that, like, in as much as we talk about the technicalities of, inclusive workspaces, it seems like such a minuscule thing, but it matters. It matters to the way people come and present themselves in these spaces. It matters to the way, people even may or may not feel comfortable, like, hey, listen, all of it, because like when I talk to the other ladies, they're constantly like, yo, I forgot my blanket. Or like, because I was just passing somebody the other day, they had an electric blanket with them. I was like,
guilty.
Okay. Right. The other day, I was like, I went to the laboratory, and this woman was pumping, and I'm like, in the bathroom. I'm not judging, but I'm just like, for me, I'm like, we're still not designing for the end user. And even though, let me clarify, they do have a quote unquote, what is it called? Like one of those like pumping, like multi-use spaces.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't really take into account the actual utility needs of those who are actually going to use them. I'd be sitting there like, what is your process? What's your practice of like understanding what their actual need is from this space, right? And understanding like, well, how many people are actually going to be using it? How often? Or was like, what is your annual review of what designing for that space really looks like, right? Because for me, like one of my biggest things, especially in public transit, is this issue of restrooms, right? Because back when I used to travel a lot more, it really irked me. I was like, the line for the women's bathroom. There's always a line for the women's bathroom, and dudes are just going in and coming out, going in and coming out. And I was like, it's still very reflective of who was in the design, who was in the planning, and the specifications, creations of these things. And we just never thought to change it when we welcomed other people into these spaces, because the utility needs for women or people who happen to be traveling and as a family or in that feminine form is very different than those in the masculine, right? And I'm just like, can we really address inclusivity in professional spaces, right? Because being a professional means something different, because depending on what you work, your professional space can be navigated differently. But yeah, I mean, I guess like maybe let's just really get back to the simplicity of it. Have you ever been, or like what are your what I mean, like maybe what are like, yeah, let's start there. Have you ever been or experienced hostile work environments, and what does that do to a person based on your experiences? Like what were your key lessons learned, either seeing or navigating those spaces?
Well, as a woman working in engineering for 16 years, absolutely yes. I'm sure there are some people out there who haven't experienced that. I am very happy for them, and hopefully they are feeling a good some kind of way with that. However, that's definitely not me. So for sure, absolutely. Without doubt. And I think those situations run a spectrum. So some of them are slights, some of them are microaggressions, some of them feel like death by 1,000 paper cuts, because you're like, it's just small, but it hurts, and you're like, it's fine. But then it happens over and over, and you're just like, this isn't okay. But again, as you were saying earlier, in isolation, as a one-off, maybe not too bad, but as a group, as it becomes a pattern, that's where the issue lies, is that it's ongoing and at the time feels never ending. And that's a problem. That's a problem if you're trying to sustain a career, if you're beginning in a career. You're taught a lot of things, and I'm sure many of your viewers will feel this today. You're taught a lot of things in school, and you're taught many things, either about, technical stuff, or maybe, hopefully if you're lucky, a little bit about ethics and things like that. But you know that going into some of these professions, they're male dominated. It's not a surprise. But how do you react to that when you're in a work environment? And what does that mean? And how do you handle that? That's something they don't teach you. And so when those things come up, it affects, I mean, your work. Now
Yes.
you're thinking about whatever happened and you're like, is it me? Is it like me personally as an individual? Is this because of, you know, if I'm in class A, class B, because of whatever it is, you start to wonder, what is it about me as the individual that, you know, the intersectionality of all these things that we all are? Is it one of those? Is it multiples of them? They just did not like the way my face looks. Like what's going on? And that takes a lot of emotional energy. You've already now sucking up energy that, you know, you needed or would have liked to have used on somewhere else. And as that goes on, it can creep into, you know, feelings of doubt. It's affecting your work. It's affecting whether you're going to, in the next meeting, bring up this really great idea. You know it's a great idea, but are you going to bring it up because is it worth the consequence of what happens if you do bring it up? So it can be from small to pervasive. Like I've seen it affect people's mental health. I know, Winnie, we had talked earlier, and you know, sometimes it can be as bad as like, who's crying in the bathroom today? And you know, like you're like, oh, something happened. And that's not okay. That shouldn't be for many, you know, women or, you know, other people who've been in the profession for a while. And not even just engineering. I say that because that's what I'm familiar with. Right, exactly. Yeah. But it shouldn't be that much of like, oh yeah, I know when you walk in the bathroom and who's crying today. Like that's not, like, we shouldn't all be bonding over that's a reality. Right? But again, back to your original question, it affects all parts of you, or at least it can affect all parts of you.
Fam, like because I'm out here taking notes as well as you're going. And fam, you touched on some really key points that I really do want us to circle on, right? Starting with microaggressions, right? People have normalized microaggressions because for the longest time it was just the good old boys club. Like, that's how we talk. That's well, what's wrong with that? Oh, I didn't really mean anything by that. You know what I meant, right? You know, and you know, for those of you who maybe feel unfamiliar with microaggressions are those indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination acts against members of marginalized groups. And understandably, people don't often intend to, you know, perform these microaggressive acts, but it still happens. And like we've talked about this before, in terms of your intention does not erase the impact that is felt or had or heard by those receiving what you were doing or saying. And that's why I even had to clarify in the beginning of this, is like, fam, those vibes, you know, that gut feeling when somebody says something or somebody does something, I'm like, your vibes will not lie. We will catch these vibes before people even say something. And then, and like you said, when they turn it around then and make it try to seem like and they're starting to gaslight you, where they're trying to make it seem like, oh, you're imagining things. That's not exactly what happened. It's just in your head. Right. And we see this happen so often in professional spaces. And I'm glad that you also touched on the emotional labor component of it. People don't like to, but also most people are unaware of and unfamiliar with just the emotional toll that it takes for people to perform, right? I mean, whether it was the code switching that a lot of, you know, people in or rather people in minoritized demographics have to do going into predominantly white workspaces. Because again, I often have to ask people, like, even when you ask people, well, when you think of professional, what imagery comes to mind, and who set the rules of what professional was? You know, because I know, like, when I graduated and I was stepping into the professional industry, you know, the norm was, you know, you don't go with braids to your interview. Like, you straighten your hair and you make it look presentable and professional, right? And it was only like, it was a year or two, it was a couple years ago, when, like, if you Googled professional hairstyles, it was all very a particular demographic. And if you Googled unprofessional hairstyles, it was very ethnic, very Black, non-Eurocentric hairstyles. And only till recently have we really began to embrace these differences. Because I know, even me, like, literally, anytime I would change my hair, actually, no, I don't even have to change my hairstyle. It would just have to be a weekend. Somebody comes in on Monday, like, I was like, no, I've had this hairstyle for months now. What? You saw me last week. You know, like, I know that, like, but it's like, it's such a huge deal. And so, but also, mind you, like, I love changing my hairstyles. I'm very adventurous in my protective hairstyles, right? But still, it's just that it's the way people do certain things, or the way they say certain things, or I think we talked about this when I was like that person. And the worst part was, it was on Women's Equality Day. That's why it stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
The person was like, oh, you know, I'm not using people's real names here, so clarification. So it was like, oh, you know, Martin finally put Susan in her place, blah, 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 about it. And the context matters here. The context was, Susan apparently had been, you know, consistently inquiring about something, and they're like, no, we can't do that. And I guess this person finally shut her down. And I was like, for me, just first of all, I was just like, you as a man talking about how another man put a woman in her place. And I was just like, I'll let him finish. And I was like, clarification. I also know what her place is, so that I can note, what exactly is her place? Help me understand. Because I'm like, to me, like, I was just like, I literally, because I was in the phone, I was in a quiet room, and I was just like looking around like, did I mishear this? And it's like, and that's the thing, people are like, it's not just about what is said, it was the energy with which it was said, right? It is like, there's a sense of bravado. And if people want to just simmer it down to just simply what is said, for somebody in a position of power and contextual privilege to say that in a professional setting about another fellow, you know, employee who happens to be in a marginalized demographic, and not see how that could be problematic, or like contributing to an unwelcoming or an uninclusive workspace, I was like,
it's hard. And it's along with that emotional labor then is, what do you do with that information? So something happened.
yes.
What do you do? So for example, I was in a general work environment. This was earlier in my career. And I remember it was Valentine's Day, and I was just going to go hang out, you know, do whatever. At the end of the day, I had on, I'll never forget what I was wearing. I was wearing a red burgundy sweater, and below the knee, like plaid red, natural color, black skirt. And I remember, like, I was feeling myself, feeling good, you know, walking into work. I'm ready to do the day. Let's do our thing, you know. And I remember it was some point in the day, and I was standing up, talking with a colleague, and someone who was in a position higher than I was, said, if you'd only paid attention to the words, said, oh, are you going out later? Or like, I see you're going out late, something like that. But the tone in which it was said, and then me being looked up to down and down to up, I was like, that's hard. And so when you, first of all, you're like, this is uncomfortable. So what do you do with that? Because if you're a person who is talking to someone above you, or this happens with someone who's senior to you, what do you do with that information? And then once you make the choice of what to do with it, it's it's the emotions that are then tied to that. And then if you do report it, then like, how do you, you have to describe it to someone. It's like, well, what did they say? And I'm like, okay, well, the word said this, but this is how they said it. And this was the context. And this is the body language that was done with it. And I think that also goes to, you know, your point, Winnie, of like, it's more than just the words. It's the context. It's the emotional labor that goes with it. You know, it's everything. And, you know, if it's a, you know, one-off thing, you know, one situation, well, let me preface, depending upon the situation.
Right.
But one situation does not necessarily make a toxic work environment. But it will contribute to it. And I mean, depending upon the situation, it might that you now have a toxic work environment because of one incident that happened. But that's hard. What do you do with it? What's the underlying cause? All of that. So many questions to fit into our conversation today. So
facts. And for me, it's the fact that if they're willing to do it the first time, they're willing to do it the second and the third and the fourth and fifth time and so on. And as long as you don't call it out, because they obviously don't recognize that it is uncomfortable and problematic, they will continue doing it. But then now the onus is put on you as a person not in a position of power to call it out, because also understandably others who are also not in positions of power will hesitate to call it out, right? Because I've been in one of the situation and I was like, hold up, you know, like similar to that one that I explained, where I had to be like, hey, I think this is a learning moment. Can we pause on this and like circle back and address why you feel it was okay for you to say this in the manner you said it? And then sure, there's usually a lot of defensiveness going on around that, right? Where they're like, I didn't mean it like that. That's just how you took it. Then they're turning it around for you now, trying to make you
this is your problem, of course.
It's the you problem, right? And then it gets even better when they're like, "Oh, we can have a separate conversation." I was like, "Nah, fam. Like, listen. I'm a firm believer of please, keep the same energy. May your apology, when it comes to it, be just as loud and impassioned as your disrespect. Say it with your chest, okay? Because you know what you said and how you said it and why you said it. And so, for me, we're gonna have, because people like to do that, where you will do some crazy things in public, create an unwelcoming and uninclusive work environment, and then expect the person who caught it, right, to then have a separate, powwow with them and never come back and address the group because you altered the group dynamics. But you don't want to come back and address it within the group. You want to have a separate, and then at that point it just becomes like a he said, she said thing. And I'm like, we will not be having that. No, like it's 2021. And I would just like to encourage all those people out there going through this in this season. And whenever you happen to be watching this, toxic work environments are real out here, and for me it's saddening, it's disheartening. And especially, again, also context, COVID really exposed a lot of problematic workplaces.
Yeah, it did a number on people and is continuing to.
It's literally COVID and all just the back-to-back police brutality issues, the major inequities on race, on gender, on just like socioeconomic impacts and standings. I was like, all these things really did a number, and people dying. Like, people's mentality has shifted in like what's really important, what really matters, like in context, like how much energy can I really give to this thing? And is it even worth it? Right? When we're talking about toxic work environments and mental health, because that's the other thing. Like we're finally hearing a lot more about it, and hopefully people are having better access to better mental health. Because again, just because mental health assistance is available doesn't always mean that it is accessible to everybody who needs it. And we need to get very real about that as well, especially people dealing in such workplaces, work environments, right? Because again, as I mentioned, sometimes it's literally built in. It's oftentimes built into the company culture, into the organizational culture, where they'll be like, we are one insert company here, name here. We are one family, right? However you want to describe it. But I'm like, the African in me is like, are you mad? Are you on crack? Like, what drugs are you doing? Eh? Like what's one? What one? And what I was like, help me understand how we are one, because I don't see it. I don't see it. Whether you're looking at the, organizational structural dynamics, whether you're looking at, accessibility to, to upward mobility in those spaces, right? People sometimes don't even see real avenues for growth and progress, but you're like, we're one though. We're one, right? People have been telling you, like, hey, this system is broken, these things are not functioning. And yet the people in positions of power are like, oh, we know that this isn't perfect. We know it doesn't work, but that's just how the system is. And I hear that literally from like so many people in different companies. I'm talking very generally here. It's like that's literally, it's like copy and paste, these toxic cultures of professionalism.
Yeah, and it goes a lot back to how safe do you feel with the people around you. So sometimes we talk about physical safety. Okay, so that's one part, but are you psychologically safe as well? Do you feel safe sharing that you feel unsafe in a position? Sometimes you do. And so sometimes you don't.
Unsafe, unseen, unheard.
Exactly. And so it's challenging because, if you're a company or you're an organization that offers, health wellness, hopefully you are, and offers access to, mental health care.
Yes.
That's great. And are you making sure that your employees, team members, associates, do they feel safe accessing that? If they need to take time for that, is that something that they're not going to feel, shamed for? Is it okay to even bring up in a meeting, hey, what options do we have access to? What are the programs? Making sure that even people just say, hey, remember, we have employee benefits, and with those employee benefits is the access to, whatever program that you have, and reminding people that, hey, you do have access to this, and don't feel some sort of way about accessing it. These are benefits to you. You're already paying for them. You might as well use them. They're here for you.
But and I, first of all, I want to commend companies that do actually offer those mental health and resources surrounding that to their employees and their families, oftentimes. But also on the flip side, again, going back to that whole performative aspect of mental illness, like, we care about your mental health. We care about your mental health as long as you keep coming back to work and being productive. We care about your mental health as long as don't bring it over here. We care about your mental health as long as just allow us to continue in the status quo. So to me, it really feels, again, performative. It really, to me, a lot of times, as I've talked to a whole bunch of people about this and their respective experiences in those spaces, it's a band-aid solution. It's oftentimes either the band-aid solution to not change these toxic workspaces, because you can go ahead and get all the therapy that you need. You can go ahead and talk to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and get a mental health, coach and all that stuff. You can do that all day, every day. But if you have to come back to these polluted environments,
well, it's got to be part of a
how
whole
effective
program.
is that?
Yeah, it's part of a whole program. So just like your, if you have mental health benefits, just like those are part of your health, and hopefully you've got dental and whatever your benefit package is.
Yes.
And again, that's I guess showing sort of my privilege of coming from a profession that there's usually some sort of benefits attached to it. So, well, that's with that stated, whatever that benefit package is, it's not just like, hopefully you wouldn't have an organization that's like, yeah, we got health insurance, but I'm still going to need to send you into this extremely dangerous situation without any of the protections or anything else that you need. No, it's fine. We don't need to do any of that, blah, 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 because you have like healthcare. So like when we push you off this platform, it doesn't matter what happens, because like if you break your leg, you're fine.
Right. The harness, PPE for you. You'll be all right. Break your leg. It's all right. You have insurance. You good. Right, you can walk it off.
That's what your insurance is for. We'll pay for those crutches. But like, wait, just like that's with your mental health. Like this is part of a program. Like you put other things in place so that, hopefully you don't have to use it. But if you do have to use it, here it is for you. And we're going to try to put in place environments where, again, you feel safe. We talk about, physical safety and, what that means. We should be talking about, mental, emotional, psychological safety as well. That's part of your work environment too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, again, quick PSA here. If you happen to have witnessed or experienced any kind of harassment or assault, again, don't forget to complete the HARP survey. We have two surveys, one specifically for police brutality, and the other one is for general harassment and assault incidents. Please takes less than three minutes. Submit your responses. It helps. It helps in understanding the baseline of really like what is the general consensus on how people view these issues, whether it is workplace harassment, domestic abuse, domestic violence, or any kind of relational or situational abuse. These are things that oftentimes go hand in hand and overlap into the other areas of our lives, right? So you can't say that you're going to separate. For example, let's say somebody's dealing with child abuse or domestic abuse issues. You can't say that they can separate that when they come to the workplace, right? Because for the longest time, people used to be like, "Oh, keep work at work and keep your home life, keep your personal life out of your work life." But you bring those with you to your workplaces, right? If you're going through something at home, it's inevitably going to somehow spill over into who you are at work and your ability to concentrate and do your job to the best of your capacity. And same thing for work. If you're dealing in these toxic work environments, it's very difficult to just leave that at work, especially if it is affecting your mental health and your peace and your psychological well-being, right? And so I'm just really glad we're actually like, and as much as we're trying to keep it light, like these are really, really deep concerns in society, especially in this season, because it's embarrassing how much like I tell people about this and they're like, oh my gosh, let me tell you what I'm going through. Like literally, it's every time I bring it up, it starts a whole other conversation, and I'm like, yo, people are going through it out here. If no one else is, people are going through it. And so, like as you said, it's important to know also when to walk away, right? When it gets to that point where you're just like, listen, you know what? I have done my best. I have tried and I've tried, and this is no longer my ministry. It's also okay to be like, fam, like, let's figure out how to find better accommodating workspaces, right? And it's okay to do it. And I feel like sometimes people do need that reminder that it is okay to put yourself first, to put your mental health and well-being, in as much as you may love doing that particular work, you may also need to prioritize your wellness, right? And psychological and emotional health.
And I
For
think
your
some
Go
people
ahead.
need permission for that, that it's okay.
Yeah.
And saw some examples of that, over the Summer Olympics of,
Mm.
it's okay. It's okay if
Yes.
you do what you can do. And when you're pushed to that limit of, can I continue to safely do whatever it is that, I
Mm.
love to do, or, sometimes it's just what I like to do. Like it doesn't, have to encompass your whole life, but, you know, it's okay. It's okay to say, you know what, thanks, but no thanks. And,
Yeah.
I'm going to not, whatever not is, I'm just gonna not right now.
Right.
And that's hard, but
Yeah.
it's hard because that's not what I
Yeah.
think
We're
most
not
people,
tough.
again,
Mm.
my opinion, my observation, but I don't think that's what most people are saying. Like, no,
Yeah.
you keep fighting and you don't want to be a quitter and all of that. It's like, well, like
Ooh.
let's
Yeah.
be careful with it. And I think most of it
Yeah.
comes from a good place. You don't want to just try something once and say, you know what, like I couldn't do it and I, don't want to, and I'm not going to try again. But I
Yeah.
think that with all things in life, there's these shades of gray. And,
Yeah.
when you kind of come up to, it's like, well, I don't want to be a quitter, or I don't
Mm.
want to, say I can, or I don't want to show that like this is a weakness. And you're like, okay, well, like, let's remember things operate in so much of life on, in a gray area or on a spectrum that, like, yeah, maybe for a while, you want to, and again, depends on the situation as always, but
Yes.
you might, address it. If you have an issue with a person, you might try to address it. You might try to bring it
Mhm.
to, whoever your superior or your
Mhm.
supervisor, manager, or whomever. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe even for a while, you know what, like, I'm going to go in and change the system and we're going to create a program and
Mhm.
diversity program or whatever. And you're really going to, but it's okay at some point to say, you know what, like, I did what I could do. And that doesn't even mean you need to go up and go to that level that I just described. If you get to the level where you're just, that, what, this
It's not
isn't
my ministry.
right,
Yeah.
this isn't
But
it, then it's okay. You don't have to try all the things and be all the things to
yeah.
everyone. Um,
Yeah.
and that's hard. But I think we're seeing, like, to your point, I think we're seeing more of that right now, that it's like, you know what,
Absolutely.
like,
Absolutely.
I gave this what I could give. And I
Yes.
don't, like, I don't have more of me to give right now.
It reminds me of, was it was Dane Cook, who was like, I don't know if you've seen that, the comedy moment where he's like, but I'm like, literally, sometimes it just gets to the point, just like, you know what? Listen, I did my best, and clearly, just this ain't it. It's not giving what it was supposed to give,
It's not
and
what I'm supposed
I
to get.
must I must continue moving, and like, yeah, because people sit there and be like, oh, you can get upper management involved, get those executive level, involvement. And sometimes even with the best of intentions, in practicality, it doesn't happen to be so. So again, this is a reminder that it is okay. Give yourself permission to know you know, when that situation, that environment, that position is no longer serving you, so that you can be of service in that next place that is going to actually be supportive of you. Because the reality, again, I want to, as we're closing out here, I want to remind us that DI, this moving when we move, as we move beyond performative diversity, because we know we've been hearing about diversity for ages, right? People are like, oh, let's get you diverse this, diversity quotas and all that stuff. When we're moving beyond performative diversity to equitable inclusion and restorative justice, okay, this is not like a side thing that we do to the main serving. This is stuff that we need to prioritize and be intentional about, right? Because we got here in a very intentional manner, whether via policies or laws that perpetuated these problematic ideologies that got built into the systems and structures of governance and how we've normalized society. And also the reality is there are folks oftentimes in positions of contextual power, but also just literal positional power, who benefit from the chaos that persists in these environments. And so they would rather uphold these bastions of oppression rather than change them, because change, as we hear oftentimes, it's uncomfortable, especially if you've been comfortable for such a long time. So I just want to remind us also to not be so quick to want to jump to the kumbaya solutions, right? While ignoring the root causes of why we got to, the building is on fire. It's on fire. But we're like, just throw some water on it, without ever really addressing who started the fire, from where did it start, and how do we ensure that we are creating, environments that do not, have this, the next building burning again in the same manner. So, lessons learned. So, as I had mentioned, quick shout out, actually. I believe Correlation One, Data Science for All, they're currently accepting applicants for their programs. They have 3 programs. Please do check them out. It's a great data science. If you're looking to get your data science chops up, looking to make moves into data science spaces, check out Correlation One's Data Science for All programs. I believe this last deadline coming up is September 3rd. That's in a couple of days. September 3rd, Friday, September 3rd. Okay, so submit your application. First of all, it is free, and it prioritizes being more inclusive and specifically catering to folks coming from marginalized demographics. So if you meet the criteria, for applicant submittals, please consider that. I'm always here. Yeah, listen, you know me. I'm all for sharing the resources, sharing the information. If it helps you, it helps you. If it's not for you, I understand. Keep it moving. Also, I did mention a special project before that I was working on, and there'll be giveaways too. So stay tuned. Follow the hashtag follow this hashtag for the latest updates and all that good jazz. I will bring up the hashtag shortly here, right? Follow this hashtag. Okay, there's gonna be stuff coming through. Stuff is coming through. So if you're gonna stay, updated on this project coming up, and there'll be special giveaways. Trust me, you don't want to miss it, because it ties quite well into this very topic. Regardless of whatever your work professional spaces may look and feel like. And so, I mean, as always, if you enjoyed this discussion today with Audra and I, do share this live with the next person. Let them know, but like, hey, listen, tune in. And if you'd like to be a guest here on Let's Harp About It, drop a message, drop a line, and stay connected with us across our HARP social media platforms. That's at HARPNOW.org. That's HARPNOWORG. That's on Facebook, IG, Twitter, YouTube, or on our website. You can connect straight to our website at www.harpnow.org. And before we leave, first of all, Audra, can I just say thank you for taking your time to share your great wisdom and lived experiences with us, because that's much needed. We need to normalize sharing our lived experiences, because it's one thing to bring our technical skills, right? Because schools are matriculating engineers and STEM folks like literally every year, right? Oh, thank you, Alexis Washington. Listen, we out here. Thank you, sis. It's like schools are matriculating engineers every day, but what we're really seeing the need in, or the gap in, is engineers who understand global context, engineers who understand the human elements of engineering, and understanding that what we do as technical folks, whether it's in design and research and development or policies, right? We do it for humans. And what we do impacts people for generations, fam. And I'll keep saying that. And so, Audra, I honor you and I appreciate you today for your time. And also, I want to give you about a minute or so to like do any final comments if you would like to share any specific information with the people, maybe how they can reach you or any of that good stuff. Please take a minute.
Sure, would love to. Thank you so much, Winnie, for having me on. This has been delightful, and I hope there's people out there that are also finding this valuable. I guess a little bit last on the subject. Also remember what we used to say. So when we don't travel quite as much anymore, but remember you're on the airplanes and they would say, put your mask on first before you put it on, somebody who's with you who needs care. That's part of it. So there's lots of us out there doing, a lot of great work and trying to bring it to leadership. And there are, still good leaders out there who are trying to bring this and, make better organizations that are safer for their folks. Remember, at some point, put your mask on. Put your mask. I mean, actually, that works right now anyway in the middle of a
please do.
Pandemic or a panini, whatever you want to call it. But like, put your mask on. Let's all do that. But in the context of taking care of yourself, remember, take care of yourself because people are going to need you and they're going to count on you. And you need to make sure that you're there. And so that doesn't mean burning yourself out. That means taking care of yourself so that you can be comfortable within you. So then later you can help others. So it's not, don't think of it as being selfish. You're doing what you need to do. But yes, thank you again. If anyone wants to reach me, I'm available on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to find me. I'm trying to keep posting about things. In between work and
all the things
life, we all have life outside of work, whatever that might be. So, but yeah, always happy to connect with other people and keep on keeping on. Stay safe, stay sane right now, and yeah, just remember you're gonna be all right, and just keep on keeping on.
Thank you, Audra. You're speaking to them, you're speaking to me as much as you're speaking to them. So thank you. I appreciate you. Like, fam, I can't say anything more than that. She already covered it. So again, thank you all out there for watching and taking a minute out of your busy days to just connect with us here and join in this conversation. Hopefully it's not the last. We'll continue having more of these discussions because it's needed, it's necessary, and things are changing. And so we'll be back sooner than you know it. So otherwise, I hope to see you guys on the next Let's Harp About It right here on the Harp platform.